know Justin Schmidt. He's currently the VP of Marketing for a software startup called Compt. And he's going to share some of the lessons he's learned over the years in working in tech, some AI companies, and throughout just hitting these really big software plays. So Justin, thanks for being here today.
Quite welcome, Chad. Happy to be here.
So let's just get into it. Let's talk about your journey. You were saying there was a company that had a big exit, and then it really went through kind of a turnaround. So you want to jump into that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to share that story. So in 2009, I joined a B2C media and publishing company called Announce Media. And I was one of the first 30 employees. And a few years later, we ended up selling that business to a private equity firm for $950 million. You could look it up. Answers.com sells to Apex Partners. And that was a hell of a ride because we went from 20-something people to over 600, a couple $100 million in revenue, offices all over the world. Crazy, crazy ride, right? And then shortly after that, Google and Facebook made some policy and algorithm changes that very negatively impacted the business. And we ended up going through a Chapter 11. Again, this is all public. You can look it up. And then reemerged from that Chapter 11 as a new entity, and then continued to have some success until I left there in 2018. And what's nuts about that scenario is that I got to kind of view the whole life cycle, right? Everything from very early to holding on for dear life as the rocket ship is taken off towards the moon to crashing the thing into the rocks and starting over. And it really was a lifetime of business experience and education rolled into one crazy 9-year period. I often joke that like I have one of the most valuable MBAs ever made, even though I don't actually have my MBA from a college or whatever. But the life experience of that taught me more than any business school ever would.
And you stayed on through that sale and then yeah. So you got to see that entire flow.
I did. It was crazy. I think the biggest takeaway I can have from that, and to kind of answer a question you haven't asked, but when you have real adversity, and I'm talking real adversity, I'm not talking like, oh, our such and such account didn't renew. I'm talking, how are we going to help the business survive another day adversity? You really get to learn what is valuable in stack ranking your levers to pull and understanding like, where can I make the most impact with the smallest adjustment, and really, really understanding how to optimize efficiently. Because I think a lot of times when companies are in peacetime, so to speak, you're experimenting with a lot of different things. You're trying pieces here and there. But at the end of the day, what you're doing, if you want to think about this in the context of, say, a landing page test, is you're effectively looking at, do I make the button red or blue, right? Does it say talk to sales or get demo, that kind of thing? And it's like, look, you might have a few tenths of a percentage point increase in one of those versus the other. You might even get a statistically significant result from it. But that's not like stepwise improvement in real change in what you're trying to do. Whereas sitting back and saying, okay, business model A is no longer viable. What can we do with business model B? And going back to first principles and making those decisions, that's crazy. But you just don't do that otherwise, unless your back is against the wall and you have to, you know?
Were you guys able to come up with a solution to bring it out of that?
We did. We basically were able to reconfigure our, I want to be careful here because I don't want to get into too much crazy detail, but we were effectively able to reconfigure our brand portfolio and how we were approaching traffic acquisition in such a way that was copacetic with the algorithm landscape and some of the policy changes that those big companies made. And yeah, we were able to figure it out. And it was interesting because the stuff we did to get there is exactly what I was referring to earlier. It was not changing the color from red to blue. It was a big repositioning exercise and rebuilding some of the tech stack to allow us to make much deeper changes from a technology perspective in order to run certain split tests that were far more involved than simple like design type stuff. So everything from landing page experience through the conversion process, back through the, in this case, it was an ad business, how we manage the waterfall of what ads we were going to show on the page, and optimizing for our payback period, and all these other things that just, like, you just wouldn't think to build infrastructure to do that unless you had to.
Yeah, it's amazing when you have your back up against the wall, what you end up coming up with. So
Yeah, it really is.
So what happened next on your journey after you moved on from Answers?
After the Answers Multiply ride, I wanted to do something different. In my career, I've been very, very fortunate and very lucky to have worked with a lot of amazing founders and a lot of very different kind of startups in different industries. And after being in B2C and media and direct to consumer type ad supported stuff, I really wanted to do something very different. And one of the original Answers founders was starting a new software as a service business, specifically an artificial intelligence business that still does a AI support desk, help desk suite. And I joined them early as a marketing leader to help bring that to market. And it was a lot of fun for me because going from speed of light conversion cycles and how long does it take an ad to load on a page versus your typical B2B SaaS conversion cycle where, you might get a form filled out in October, and then the meeting happens in November, and then the contract isn't signed until the following April, right? So go from 6-month conversion of knowing, hey, did my marketing actually lead to a sale, coming from however long it takes the ad request to load a ad on a landing page and therefore start earning revenue on a publishing kind of cycle, right? So that was a wildly, wildly different experience, but I loved it. I loved getting back into the people side of marketing and really understanding how buyers think, getting into their minds, getting into how can we solve the pain and the problems of our ICP, and like what can we do to really help them versus the more, I would say, like marketing engineering problem of, hey, if I'm going to drive 1 million visitors to this website today and I need to make a fraction of a cent in profit on each and every one, how are we going to optimize that? Just a very different journey than selling $100,000 a year enterprise software.
A large part of what you do is figuring out how the buyer thinks, right?
Yeah, and I mean, in marketing, that's all it is, right? Like,
Yeah.
At the end of the day, everyone thinks of a marketing funnel that leads to, a conversion event, right? So you have awareness, and then that goes into interest, decision, action, or top funnel, middle funnel, bottom funnel, problem aware to product aware. Pick your methodology. But at the end of the day, when you really think about it, the marketing funnel, sales funnel, and like your sort of post-acquisition customer success, customer service motion, really all of those things are the same journey, just different parts of it. And sales is a discipline of people working with people. And it's all marketing is too, is people working with people. You're just maybe doing it from a step or two back in more broad perspective than a salesperson on a demo call or a contract negotiation, or a customer support rep working with admin on solving a very specific problem. And it's been really invigorating for me to work with businesses such as Capacity or now Comped, who are solving real problems and providing real value for these users and customers. Absolutely adore it.
With the with any of these companies, Was there some sort of setback or something with getting into the mind of the buyer that once you broke through, like, oh, we figured this out?
It's an interesting question. I think a lot of times marketers look to sort of second or third order abstractions to validate that kind of concept, right? Where, oh, I know it works because a lot of people clicked on the ad. Oh, I know it works because a lot of people that clicked on the ad filled out the form. Oh, I know it works because a lot of people that saw the ad, clicked on it, filled out the form, scheduled a meeting with sales and the follow-up. But at the end of the day, like, you need to talk to customers, you need to talk to prospects and try to get into maybe a little bit of a deeper understanding on kind of what they're feeling, what they're going through. And you want to be careful because the plural of anecdote isn't data, right? And you don't want to take an anecdotal conversation and abstract that into some sort of governing data set to drive whatever your next big campaign is. But I do think there's a lot of value to having an individual conversation with a customer. You know, marketing doesn't spend a lot of time talking to customers generally. And every time I've ever done it, I found it nothing but beneficial. And that's where you kind of see, to answer your question directly, where you see how you are impacting that change and how you're providing that value. And, you know, I've been able to do that from a variety of perspectives. So, for example, we have a activation at a trade show or something where maybe we've got like a product demo we're doing and a booth and all that. And you get to talk to people who are at the show and you're like, hey, just curious, like, was there any speaker that resonated with you, or any of the sessions particularly good, or was there any other vendor here besides us that you wanted to see that was doing something interesting? And you just get this great perspective from people, right? And then you can take some of that feedback and some of that qualitative assessment back and think about how you're going to approach the next one, right? So yeah, I think the long way of saying, talking with your customers and talking with your prospects as a person, kind of one-to-one, you get a lot of insight that you wouldn't if you're just looking at a Google Analytics or HubSpot report.
All right. These days, have you found a particular strategy or even a platform that you're like, oh, I'm really reaching my customers right now?
Yeah, I have never had the curse or luxury to be working at, Salesforce or something that's so big. The abstraction between your customer and marketing is pretty big there, right? Like, they have tens of thousands of customers. You do an activation, you're only going to be looking at bird's eye view, 50,000 foot kind of reports. So for me, from a tools perspective, I really do like going into the CRM, and looking at the conversation history between the prospect and sales, and then the account managers and the admins, and really kind of seeing that stuff. And if you look at, say, a CSAT score report, right? So you're looking at, let's say you do a very simple green, yellow, red kind of breakdown of your customers. Go look at in the CRM at the conversation history of the green customers, then go look at the conversation history of the red customers. Hopefully there's a hell of a lot more green than there are red, so you can sample the population more thoroughly on the red side. But those tools do give you a window into that stuff that, like, you're just not going to see if you're looking in Google Analytics and looking at, event tracking and time on site and bounce rate and all this. That might not tell you any sort of real connection story. That just tells you how long the browser was in view. You know what I mean? So I like to look at the CRM specifically, and even more specifically, running a report, say, on a particular campaign or cohort of campaigns, and then going and looking at some of the post-marketing activity for the prospects and accounts that were won in those cohort campaigns.
It makes a lot of sense. You get more information from that type of data versus a couple clicks or time spent.
Well, yeah, it's not necessarily, I wouldn't say it's more or less information. It's just different. And it's also not the kind of information you're typically looking at. Like an open rate report in an email sender only tells part of the story. Seeing the back and forth between a salesperson and a customer who became a lighthouse account, look at a couple of those, start seeing some trends, and oh, every single time we do this, in Comp's example, all these HR leaders have this great benefit that they want to offer their teams, but they're underwater trying to manage them in spreadsheets, or they've got a bunch of different vendors that they're using and they want to offer something more customizable. And you just sort of see that story repeat itself over and over and over again in the notes, in the gong calls, if you've got access to that. It's just a much different way of thinking. I think a lot of marketers, especially ones that focus on digital, just miss.
It's good to know. So Justin, if our listeners wanted to get in touch with you or reach out to your current venture, how would they do that?
I am on LinkedIn trying to be a thought leader like everybody else. So if you go to LinkedIn, Justin Allen Schmidt, you can follow me there and get a mix of marketing advice, leadership advice, and the occasional shit post. If you wanted to know more about Compt and what we're doing, compt.io is the website. Got everything you'll ever need there. Of course, you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. But yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best place to start. Justin Allen Schmidt.
All right, well, thank you, Justin, for coming on the show. And thank you, everybody, for listening to Failing to Success. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to follow and rate the show, like, comment, and subscribe for more great content.